So far we've made 3 pages, which are all visible by an unauthenticated user of our app: the login page, the sign up page, as well as the not found page. But now we're going to move on to the different views, the different pages that an authenticated user of our app can see. And we're going to start with the feed page. Now this is going to be visible when a user's logged in and they just go to the main page of our app, the root path of our application. Here we're looking at just Instagram.com, and we see that it consists of some simple elements here. It just consists of a nav bar up at the top. We have an area here to the left where we can scroll through our list of feed posts for the given user's feed. We have some suggestions of users to follow within it, and fixed to the right hand side we have some information about the currently authenticated user, as well as another area for suggestions for users to follow. So we're going to head over to the feed page as well. And the first thing that we need to add is our layout component. So we're going to import layout from components, shared layout, and we're going to wrap everything in the layout. Now in just a bit we're going to add more to this nav bar. We're going to add the ability to search for users, add a search up at the top, as well as links to these other routes. And let's navigate to the feed page ourselves. We'll just go to localhost 3000. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to structure this feed page a bit. We want to lay out the areas where we're going to have where we're going to display all of our feed posts, and then the area where we're going to display our sidebar. So we're going to grab classes, and within layout we're going to have a div, and this is going to have the class container. Within that will be another div, and this is where we're going to iterate over a set of data, a number of feed posts. Now we don't have any real data to work with just yet, but I've provided some dummy data here in data.js. So we have the option to use either this object, default post, or get default post. We'll see which to use here in a second. So we're just going to do the same trick that we've done before, where we take an array, and this array is just going to have a length of 5. And we're going to, using the map function, the map argument here, we're going to have it return a default post. So we're going to import a default post object, and that's going to be from data. So we're going to go a couple levels up and go into that data file, or actually one level up. And with that array we're going to map over it, and we're going to get the post, and we want to display a feed post. So we want to import the feed post component. It's going to be from components. We're going to go into the feed folder and select feed post. This is just going to be local to the feed page, and we'll provide a key where it's going to be set to post ID. So each of these posts is going to be an object that has an ID property. So the unique key is going to be post.id, and we'll pass down the post data on a prop of the same name. Now when we save this, we see just the text feed post 3 times for that component, but we're going to get an error telling us we have a number of children with the same key. So that we have unique keys for each of our posts, I've created a special function that basically just gets the default post, gets all of the same data, but by calling it, it creates a unique ID using this UUID function that we've imported up at the top. So the benefit of this get default post function is that it helps us avoid that problem, that error, or warning really. So instead of importing default post back in feed.js, we want to import get default post, and it's going to come from the same place. Now just make sure that you call that function at the end of this inline arrow function. So now when we iterate over the feed post component, we no longer get that warning. So that's one part of this component, the kind of left-hand side, and we're going to be building out the feed post component here in a sec. But what about the sidebar here on the right? Well, underneath this div here, we're going to have the sidebar area. So up above, we have the feed posts, and then underneath we have the sidebar. So here, if we take a look at a smaller version, say a mobile or a tablet version of the Instagram site, when we make our viewport narrower, we see that at a certain breakpoint, the sidebar goes away entirely. So in order to do that, in order to hide it, let's import the hidden component from Material UI, and we want to hide this on the XS size, the extra small size. Now we can use the only prop, or an alternative approach that I'm going to be using to define a given breakpoint for the hidden component is we can also say for a given breakpoint, say small, with SM, we can either use the keyword up, so that means the breakpoint greater than this size, or SM down beneath this size. So beneath the SM breakpoint, we want to hide the sidebar. And this is going to consist of a div. This sidebar is first going to consist of a div with a class of sidebar container. Then that will be another wrapping div, the class sidebar wrapper. I'll kind of use those two terms synonymously, container and wrapper. Then we're going to use the user card component that we mentioned to display the user's information here. So this is a shared component in our shared folder, so we'll import it from the same place as layout, user card. And we'll add it right here. And then underneath that, we're going to have our feed side suggestions, what we called our feed side suggestions. So let's see if we can import that. And this is also going to be from the same place as feed post. It's going to be from the feed folder. We don't need to pass any props to them just yet. So now if we look at our result, we see our sidebar area here, the user card and the suggestions. And if we make our view smaller, we see it's hidden on an XS size or beneath the SM breakpoint. Now let's begin by building out our feed post component, giving it some structure. So this is going to be each of these individual posts that we see in our feed is going to be the feed post. So I'd classify it as having really three different parts, three separate parts. It's going to have a header up here, which is also going to reuse the user card, their avatar and username. And that also is going to consist of a more button. That's going to enable us to see a kind of options dialog. Then we're going to have the media itself, which will be an image. And then we're going to have this footer area. And it's first going to consist of some buttons here in this row, number of likes, the caption that the user has written, and then a couple of comments underneath. Kind of a preview of all of the comments, as well as a link to see all of the comments for that post. So let's head into the feed post component, and remember that we're passing down the post data on this post prop. So let's head into that, and we might as well jump ahead and just destructure this post data while we're at it. And we're going to grab classes. And instead of starting with a div, let's start with just a fragment, some fragment tags, and we'll have an article within it. Now this is going to have the class article. And the first thing within this article is going to be our feed post header. So we're going to have a div that's going to contain all of our header content, and it'll have the class post header. And first we'll have our user card here. and we'll have a more icon. Now remember that all of our icons, all of the specific icons that we're going to be using that are from Instagram and are not specific to Material UI, they're all going to be coming from this icons.js file, and we're going to use them like normal React components. So we want to import the more icon here. The more icon, this will be a named import from 1 level, 2 levels up, from icons. You can just hover over it and make sure that you're importing the right thing. And it's going to have the class of more icon. Then underneath this div, we'll have the feed post image. So this is going to be contained within a div, and we're going to display this image with an image element where the source is going to be set to the media. If we go back to data, it's going to be from the media property of each of our post objects. So we can go ahead and destructure post, and you can always refer to data in order to figure out what each of these objects consist of. It'll be more obvious as we build out our app, but first we can destructure the media property and use that as the source, and then the alt text is going to be post media with the class name for the image of image. And underneath this div, we're going to have our feed post buttons, that row of buttons here. This will be in a div with the class post buttons wrapper. Then another div just called post buttons. And the first thing that we'll have here is our like button. So when we like a given post, you can see it turns into a red heart and it bounces a little bit, it increases in size a little bit, and the same animation takes place when we unlike a given post. So we're going to create a special component underneath called like button. And we're going to use the like button here within our post button, our post buttons div. We'll build out this component in just a bit. Next, we're going to have a link. We want to import a link because this is going to, when a user clicks on this comment icon, it's going to take them to the comments page. So grab link from React Router DOM. This is going to be to, and we want to go to a specific post. So that route again is /p, and then we want to include the ID at the end. So we want to grab the ID property of the post, destructure it. So to p/that ID, and then within the link we'll have an icon called the comment icon, which will also import from the icons file. Next we'll have a share icon for our button to share a given post with other users. And then we're going to have another special component called a save button, and it's going to work just like the like button. So we'll create that underneath the like button. And so this is where you can save a given post. You can kind of bookmark it, and it has a similar behavior. Now underneath this first div, underneath the post buttons div, we're going to have a typography component, and this is to display the number of likes for a given post. The class name will be just likes. The variant will be subtitle 2. Then we're going to have a span within typography, and we're going to perform a little calculation here, or a little check to make sure that if likes is more than 1, we show likes plural, but if it's just one like, we include the text one like with no s at the end. So we'll add a ternary here, and we'll check the likes property. So we'll grab likes from post, and if likes is equal to 1, which it isn't, in this case it's equal to 10. if likes is equal to 1, then we're going to say 1 like. Otherwise, we'll just use a nested template literal to say likes, that interpolated value, and then the text likes plural. Then after the likes count, we're going to have the caption. Now, when we look at the caption, we see that for all of the posts, initially it has this collapsed version of the caption. You can see you have maybe 1 or 2 lines, and you have this ellipse, this dot 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 at the end, indicating that there's more content. And then to see the rest of that content, to see the rest of the caption, you have to hit the More button, and then it expands all of it. So the way that we're going to manage all of this is we're going to have 2 states for a caption's text. We're going to have an expanded and a collapsed state. And we're going to manage this, keep track of this with useState. So we're going to create some state here that'll initially be false. And we're going to have, for the state value, this is going to be called showCaption, and the setter will be setCaption. And additionally, in order to appropriately show or collapse the caption, we're going to be using a special component. Let me go to a collapsed view. We're going to be using a special component or a tool that's going to enable us to, no matter how long our caption is, collapse it just to a single line here. And that tool that we're going to be using is a third-party package called React Lines Ellipsis. So we want to import a specific component from that package called HTML Ellipsis. And that's going to be from React Lines Ellipsis /lib/HTML. And we'll see how this works in just a second. So first of all, underneath our likes text, we're going to have a div where the class name is going to be conditionally set based off of our show caption state. If we're showing a caption, we're going to have the class of expanded. If not, if show caption's false and we want to collapse it, it's going to have the class collapsed. Then in this div, note that for each of our captions for this entire line, it's prepended with the user's, the person who made the post, that user's username. So we first want to include their username, but note that this is a link to their individual profile page. So we're going to use a link, and this is going to take users2 / and then we want to interpolate the user from the post. So we'll grab user.username. So user itself is an object. And then within the link, we're going to have a typography component where the variant will be subtitle 2. The component will be a span, and its class will be username. And for the text itself, that'll be user.username again. Then under this link, we're going to set up a conditional. So we're always going to be showing the username, but we're going to be conditionally showing an expanded or a collapsed version of the caption. So within a set of curly braces, we'll set up another ternary where if show caption is true, then we're going to return just a simple typography component. And this is just going to consist of one tag, not an opening and closing one, where it's going to have the variant of body2. Component again will be a span. And we're going to use the dangerously set inner HTML attribute. And the reason for this is that our caption consists of raw HTML. If I go back to the data file, it just consists of raw HTML here. So we're going to set on dangerously set inner HTML the _HTML property to caption. We'll need to grab that from post 2. And otherwise, if we want to show the collapsed view, we're first going to start with a div, which will have the class caption wrapper. And this is going to contain our HTML ellipsis component that's going to help us out. Again, this will just be a single tag. And we're going to set the prop unsafe HTML to caption. The class of this component will be classes.caption. And the max line property is going to be set to 0. We really only want this to be one line at the most. That's why we're setting this prop to 0. And then the ellipsis, what it's going to end in, is just going to be this ... And this is going to be based on the letters. The line amount is going to be calculated according to the letters in our caption. Then underneath we're going to have our button, which we'll think we need to import from Material UI, and we'll set that, and this is going to be our more button. So the class is going to be more button. And here when we click this button, we obviously want to change the state of show caption. So we want to set that to add an on click, and in the return of this inline arrow function, we'll set caption to true. And the text of the button will be more. Now before we hit save and test this out, let's just quickly add the rest of the feed post component, the rest of the structure. Let's add our link to view all comments. So underneath this div, we're going to have a link, and this is also going to take users to the individual post page. So it's going to be to /p/id. This will include a typography component where the class will be comments link, the variant body2, and the component will be a div. The text here will be view all, and then we'll show the number of comments. So with that, we'll take comments.length. We'll grab comments, that array from our post, our destructured post. So view all comments.length, comments. And then after this link, we want to take all of the comments and iterate over them to show them. So we'll take comments.map, we'll map over each comment object, and we're going to return a div where the key is set to comment.id. And we're going to have a link that's going to be to the comments username. So we don't see any comments here, but it will consist of a username. So we'll just hard code username here for now. Actually, will be from comment.user.username. Then will be a typography component with the variant subtitle 2, component span, the class will be comment username from comment.user.username, and then a space and another typography component underneath that. The variant body2, component span, and in this we're going to display the comment content from comment.content. Then after this, after where we're iterating over our comments, we're going to have the area where we're displaying the number of days ago, or the amount of time that's passed from a user making a given post. So this is going to have the text, the color text secondary, and the class classes.datePosted. And right now we'll just hard code the value at, as we see here, 5 days ago in all caps. And then under our closing div tag, we want to show an area for a user to add a comment. Now note, again, when we make our screen smaller, say for a mobile device, you'll note that at a certain breakpoint, the comment area goes away. So we want this to be hidden. So we'll again use the hidden component, and we want this to be hidden on SM down. Actually, we'll say XS down. We can use that breakpoint as well. We want to add a divider here. Now a divider is a component from Material UI. And we also want to add a comment component. And again, this is going to be a custom component that we're going to make locally in this file. So we need to fill out each of these components, but for the time being, I'm just going to have each of them return some simple text, return the name of the component we've created, and once we see what we have so far, we'll actually add the structure of each of these. So let's save feed post and see what we have. See if we've made any errors. And so far it's looking pretty good. We have the basic structure of everything here. We do need to fill out the user card component. And we see a couple of our buttons here. We see those two icons, we see the number of likes, and most importantly we want to check out the functionality of our caption. So we see here first the username of the user who created the post, and then their related caption. We see that it's cut off with an ellipse, so that's very good. And this ellipse stays there even at a small breakpoint. And when we hit the More button, we see our caption expand. That's good. We see the number of comments we have. We have none at the moment. We're going to see how to get the actual date that a given post was made and how to format it. But as for now, we want to fill out our entirely unstructured components: user card, like button, save button, and comment. So let's actually begin with our user card. We'll jump into that. And in almost all cases, user data is going to be passed down to user card as a prop. We're going to be showing the user in this case that created each one of our feed posts. So we want to pass down the user data from the post object here in feed post. So user is going to be set to user. So we'll, within user card, grab that prop. Then we'll grab classes and start building this out. So we're going to begin with a div, the class of wrapper. Then we'll first display the user's username, but we're going to wrap that text in a link, which we'll import. So we'll have a link that will take us to their profile page, to /user.username. Once again, we'll destructure our prop, our user object, and grab username off of that. So there'll be a link to just /user. And then we want the avatar component to show their avatar image, their profile picture. So the source is going to be from the profile image property. The source will be set to profile image here. The alt text will be user avatar. The class name, classes.avatar. Then outside of our link, we want to show their name. So that the div that will contain that will be classes.nameWrapper. Again, it'll be a link to their profile, a link to /username. Then it'll have a typography component. The variant is subtitle2, and the class classes.typography with the text username. And then after this link, underneath that we'll have another typography component where the color will be text secondary, the variant body2, class name the same, typography, and for right now we'll just interpolate their name. So they have both the username and the name properties on that user object. But we will provide some different text across our different use cases of this user card component. So let's see how that looks. So that looks a lot better. We're going to be reusing this component a lot across our different pages. Then back within feed post, let's actually make our like button, save button, and comment areas. Now for our like button, we're going to use a couple of icons here. So if we go back to the official Instagram site, you'll see that there's one empty icon used when a post isn't liked, but if it is, we have an animation and we see the red heart icon here, and we can toggle it back to its previous icon. So that's going to be dependent upon a local state that's going to be within like button, and the save button is going to function in almost exactly the same way. So we'll begin within like button by using feed post styles to get classes, but we'll also create some internal state. We want to use state, and the state is going to manage a Boolean value, and this is going to be whether a post is liked or not. So we're going to have the state value liked, and the setter will be set liked. Now, whether we show one or another icon is going to be based off of this state. So we're going to add another inline ternary, much like we did for our login with Facebook component. If a post is liked, then we want to show the unlike icon. That's going to be the red icon. We'll grab that from icons file, and we also want to grab the like icon, its inverse. So if it's liked, we want to show the red unlike icon, otherwise the empty like icon, and we're going to store the result in a variable named icon, capitalized because it's a component. And we can output that here. We always want to return that here from the component. Now the class is also going to be determined in the same way. So the class name that we use and we pass to the icon component is going to be based off of liked. If it's liked, if the post is liked, we're going to use classes.liked, otherwise classes.like. And that's going to give us our animation. And we'll also add an onClick function. If it's been liked, then we're going to have a function handle unlike be called, otherwise handle like. So we're going to pass all of these values down to their respective attributes. So class name will be passed to class name, and onClick, that function passed to onClick. Now let's make both the handle like and handle unlike functions. So handle like, to indicate that it works, we might just want to console log like, and we're going to set liked to true. Pretty simple. And we're going to do the opposite for handle unlike. We're going to say unliked and set like to false. So let's see how this works. Save. And when we like a post, and it looks like for a user card, we're using it back here within feed, but we weren't passing any user data to it. If that's not provided, let's just provide a default user as its default value. So back here within data, in addition to default post, we also have a get default user function that'll return a user's data. It consists of their ID, name, and profile image, and the same as a normal object. So let's just import default user and pass that in as the default value. Import default user from 2 levels up, data, and we'll provide that as the default value if a user prop isn't provided. and I believe that should get rid of our error. Okay, good, it does. So, and we see our user card here on the right hand side. Now if we can see our like button here, and when we click on it, we see the animation and the heart turn red, and we can toggle the unlike icon and the like icon. So visually it works just as it should. And we see that the state is being preserved between clicks. Now as for the save button, we can apply exactly the same logic. So really you could just copy all of the contents of like button and apply them to save button here. So we're still going to use feed post styles. Now the state here is going to be saved, and the setter will be set saved. The icon itself is going to be based off of that value. And instead of unlike icon, we're going to have an icon named remove icon as well as save icon. So the remove icon is going to be when it's this filled in black version, and the save icon is when we have this empty version, this outlined version. So the class name is also going to be based off of the saved state, and we're not going to need this class name property. We don't need to pass that down to the icon because we don't have any animation. We just want to show one or the other icon, and that's also going to be based upon the saved state. And here, instead of handle like and unlike, it'll be handle save and handle remove. So we want to console log save, and set saved is true, and then for handle remove, set saved is false, and we're going to log remove. And we'll pass those references to our on click. And testing this out. Oh, one more thing. We do need to pass down a class name. It's just not going to be conditionally set. It's going to come from classes.saveIcon, and that's going to put this icon at the very end of this row. So now we can toggle the state of our bookmark icon, of our save button. And last, we have our comment component. Now this is going to consist of a text area. We have the divider up top, and then we have an inline text area as well as a post button. So here we'll use feed post styles. And in order to save the text that's typed into the input, and you can see that when we have text typed in, the button is no longer disabled. If we have no text and the input's empty, the button's disabled. So we're going to store the text in a piece of state called content, and setter set content. We're going to return a div, the class comment container. Within it will be a text field with a lot of props here. The prop full width, the value, this will be a controlled component, so the value will be set to content. Placeholder will be add a comment. This will be a multi-line text field, but the max number of rows it'll be able to have is 2. So rows max will be 2. Rows will be set to 1. And we'll use an onChange and get the event, and we'll call set content, passing through event.target.value. Then the text field itself will have some input props, so we'll use the input props prop here, and we just want to use the classes property it exposes, where we want to set the root, the root class of the underlying input to classes.root, and the underline to classes.underline. Just to make it look more like Instagram's text field, and then underneath we're going to have a button where the color will be primary, the class comment button, and it's going to be disabled when we say content.trim. So we're going to trim any white space, and even if we trim the white space. If there's no content, if not content.trim, then the button's going to be disabled and the user's not going to be able to add a comment. And we're going to add the text post for that button. So when we save and try that, and additionally, the text field should have a class of text field. And when we have no comment, post button's disabled, but when we add something, and it's not white space, so if we were to add a bunch of white space here, button's still disabled, but when we add some actual text, it's not. So already we see we have all of our feed posts. We see our list. So this is shaping up nicely. We have our user card here on the right-hand side, and that's fixed to the right-hand side of the page. But notice for the Instagram site, the avatar size is just a little bit bigger than usual. So to make this bigger, here in user card, let's add another prop called avatar size. Just like with user, we'll give it a default value of 44 pixels. But we want to make this possible to override sometimes. And this avatar size property is going to be passed down to actually our hook, our user card styles hook. So pass that down as a value here, and it's going to influence from the returned classes. It's going to influence the class values that we give to the avatar component itself, and that enables us to go into our feed page and we can set avatar size to say 50. I'll make it just a bit bigger. Now as for the feed side suggestions, when we look at Instagram, this just consists of a list with a white background and a border with the text suggestions for you, and then some random users to follow, generally ones that are following us already. Within that component, we'll take classes and we'll start with an article with the same class name. Then a paper component with the same name, paper. Then typography, the color text secondary, variant subtitle 2, component H2. We'll align it to the left-hand side. Gutter bottom, add some space on the bottom, and the class typography. So this will be our header. Suggestions for you. Then underneath typography, we'll again use array.from, and the length of this appears to be 5. Will be length an array with a length of 5. And we want to return user data. This all consists of user data, so we want to call the function getDefaultUser, which will import, and we'll be able to map over the resulting array, where we'll take each user and we're going to return a div where the key will be set to user.id. The class will be classes.card, and the first thing we'll display is the user card. We'll pass the user data down to that as a prop. And then we're going to use a new component, a follow button, the follow button component. So we'll try to import that. Looks like I'll have to do it manually. Import follow button. This is also going to be from shared folder. So for follow, we're going to determine whether it's going to be to the side or not. So in some cases, looking at Instagram, the follow button is going to be underneath our content. For our suggestions area, you see this inline suggestions area, this suggestions area that's embedded within our feed post list, the follow button's at the bottom. And this is as compared to the sidebar here, the side suggestions, where follow is going to be set to the side. So to indicate that we want the follow button to be to the side, and we see that it has this blue text instead of a blue background, we're going to pass through the prop side. So side is going to be true within our follow button. So let's build that. We'll grab side from props, and we'll once again pass side, whether it's true or false, down to our hook, use follow button styles, and we'll get back classes. And again, we're going to be using some similar logic. As with our like button and save button, we're going to have some local state. It's going to be true or false, and it will initially be false. And this is going to keep track of whether we, the current user, is following a given user that the follow button is next to. So the state value is going to be is following. Setter will be set following. So we're going to have two components that we're going to create as we're going to put in individual variables. The first one is going to be a follow button, and I'm going to give it a lowercase. I'm going to have it be in camel case because I don't want it to conflict with the follow button itself. Follow button is going to consist of a material UI button, which we'll import, and it's going to have the variant according to the side data. So if it is the side, if side is true, it's going to have the variant text, otherwise contained. It's going to have the color primary in either case. It's going to have the class of button. And when we click on this button, use an inline function and set following to true. And this will be full width with the text follow. Now we can copy all of this and create a new variable which we'll call the following button if we're already following a user. So we'll take the same button, and if side is true here, it's going to have the variant of outlined, otherwise the variant text. Now the color for this is not going to be included, but it'll still have the same class of button. When we click on this button, we'll set following to false, and we'll still have full width, but the text will be following. And finally, what we're going to return is going to be based off of is following. So if is following is true, if we're already following a user, we'll use the following button, otherwise the follow button. So now we should have everything we need. We can save all this. And we have our feed side suggestions here. And it looks like I made a mistake. The text for the following button made it accidentally following button instead of just following. There we go. Okay, much better. And actually, if it's to the side, it should be text and then outlined. My mistake. There we go. So we're about done here with the feed page. Now, what else remains to be done is the loading screen. Remember when we refresh the feed page in Instagram, we see, when we're loading posts, we see this brief Instagram logo. So this is what's being shown as we're fetching those posts, all of that feed post data. So let's create that loading screen. That's in our shared folder. And this is going to consist of an icons, which we'll need to import from our icons file. And this is going to be called the logo loading icon from 2 levels up icons. Then with classes, we'll start with a section element. The class name section. And then this is going to be within a span. The loading icon is going to be within a span. Just like that. Now this is going to be displayed at the top level of our feed page. So if we're in a loading state in feed page, if loading is true, then we're going to return the loading screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly create a variable called loading and let loading equal true, just to see if this looks right. And it does. So that's what's going to be shown when we're fetching posts. I'm going to set that to false for now. But there's some other areas where we're going to need to show loading as well. For example, here within our suggestions area, we're going to need to fetch those users that our current user is going to want to follow. So that's also going to involve a request. So within feed side suggestions, we're going to have some loading state. So we'll create another local variable. We'll let loading equal true. And this is going to impact this area right here where we're iterating over all of our user data. So between these curly braces, if loading is true, then we want to turn this into a ternary. If loading is true, then we want to show a loading icon. And this is going to be from our icons file. And when we take a look at that, we see it's just a small loading icon. Pretty straightforward. So we'll set that to false for now. And then finally, at the very end of the page, this is going to be an infinite scroll. So all of our feed posts, when we reach the end, we're going to want to request more. So right now, we have about five posts that we're displaying initially when our page loads. And once we hit the bottom, more posts are going to be request. We're going to see this loading spinner. And then those new posts, that new set of posts is going to be added to the bottom. So as a result, we're going to have this infinite scroll where we can keep scrolling down, keep scrolling, keep scrolling. We hit the bottom, we hit the end of the feed, and then it fetches more and attaches them to the very end, just like that. So how are we going to do that here? We're not going to have the ability to fetch those new posts just yet, but we're going to create some state that's going to manage the visibility of this loading icon. So let's create another Boolean piece of state, which we'll name isEndOfFeed. By default, this will be false. And we're going to toggle this state value manually, so we don't need to create a setter just yet. We're going to be able to figure out whether we've reached the end of the feed or not, and that means, do we have more data? Do we have more posts to show? So underneath our hidden component, we're going to add a conditional where if we're not at the end of the feed, if we do have more data, if not isEndOfFeed, then we're going to return a large icon. We're going to import the loading large icon right here. So let's save that. And now once we hit the bottom, we see the large loading spinner. And then in the final version of our app, when that's shown, more data is going to be attached to the very end. When we have no more data to be displayed, this is just going to be empty. This area is going to be empty and we're not going to show that spinner.